Alright, I'll be refuting the proposition that cutting funding from California's higher education has an adverse effect on the economy. The first minor claim states that cutting these funds from the higher education system is going to diminish quality and the number of graduating students. The second claim we'll look at is that industry has declined from receiving subpar graduates from these schools. And the third proposition, or the third claim that we're going to be looking at is that the California economy is weakened by this declining industry. So we said they're all connected. In dealing with the first one, that higher education is going to diminish in quality and reduce the number of graduating students, the personal example used in the essay was the classes have gone from about 30 on the roster to 35 to 40 in recent times. One must ask whether this really constitutes a decrease in the quality of education. There's really no evidence to support the claim that quality of education is suffering here. In addition, no sources are given to offer credibility to the notion that budget cuts directly affect the number of graduating students. Second claim is that industry has declined from receiving these subpar graduates. Following the claim is the assertion that California's industry has failed to receive quality graduates or are forced to accept less than desirable graduates. The words subpar, quality graduates, and less than desirable graduates are not clearly defined. The first term insists that there has been harm done to the quality of education because of the budget cuts. However, since the decrease in the quality of education is only inferred by 5 to 10 students additional in class size, it's uncertain at best to claim that the small increase in class size will produce a subpar or less than desirable graduate candidate for the workforce. There's a quote referenced from Lillian Tays, which explains her adversity to the budget cuts and claims that you can't create jobs when you're cutting the very institution that educates people to do these jobs. Not only is this a biased opinion from an industry advocate because she works as a professor for CSULA, but there's also lack of support for the claim that graduates are any less prepared for their jobs than if the budget cuts had not been implemented, again hinging on whether the quality of education has truly been affected. The third claim, the state's economy is, or you define the state's economy as California's unemployment rate. The third claim goes on to say that the economy is weakened from the declining industry. There's no evidence to support the claim that California has a declining industry, though this could stem from a lower quality education, but again, this needs to be proven first. Because economy is defined as the argument as California's unemployment rate, it is said to be, and is said to be weakened by the debatably declining industry, we're forced to infer from this claim that there will be a rise in unemployment. As gathered by the OC Register, 52% of entrepreneurs in Orange County would not start up a business again. The reason given was the poor economic environment. If the state had a narrower budget deficit, the economic climate would be more desirable, which is what the business owners were shying away from in the first place. So if the deficit was down, entrepreneurs would be more likely to go into business, creating even more jobs because of the contributions from the higher education system, which lowered the deficit through their contributions. The counterclaim was offered at the end that cuts made to the higher education system help decrease the state deficit, and this is true. It was rebutted, however, with the claim that the cuts are near negligible in affecting the state budget. The evidence to support your claim is that $19 million is the deficit now, and the cut would only help by $2 billion. Excuse me, $19 billion is the deficit now, and it would only help by $2 billion. Percentage-wise, this is 10% of the state deficit, hardly percent we can call negligible. So on my final point, I would like to counter that with an allotted budget of $52 billion, it seems that only taking 3% of the higher education budget to cover 10% of the state deficit would be undesirable, of course, but practical nonetheless. Thank you.
All right, the structural things are pretty good, except I do think that you get an overwhelming sense of analysis and responses on each of the points, and you need to organize those declarative points, or you need to analyze some of those analytical points into declarative statements, and maybe signpost them as well, because there's a tendency for them to run together. You're doing a lot of analysis of the evidence that the advocate used. You're not frequently presenting counter evidence. The best example of some counter evidence that you present is when you argue a counterclaim as to why there is a lack of hiring that's going on, and you suggest it has to do more with the economic instability that's going on rather than the issue of whether there are adequate number of qualified graduates. I think you've got some good challenges on some basic issues. For instance, that the quality of the graduates is somehow diminished by the student ratio that you have, and it seems to be a presupposition that the advocate has made that there is, in a sense, some harm. If you had any data at all that suggested that employers still thought that a degree from a California State University had value to it, that would pretty much address that point and eliminate the argument that's being made here. There's just this big presupposition that's going on. I do think that your challenge to the one person's quote that suggests that they are biased is okay, primarily because they're arguing for a political position in this situation, and you show what their political relationship to the argument is. But this is another one of those places where just relying on the press is not nearly as useful as maybe developing a counter-argument on that particular point. I thought you did a very nice job summarizing the issue at the end, though, and on the statistical issue, I thought you did a very good job analyzing how the numbers are being presented and trying to suggest that they are minimal, and then kind of putting them into the context. Well, let's look at exactly how minimal they are to the state funding issues as well. I thought that was very clever. All right, thank you.